upon suffering beyond suffering. The red nation shall rise again, and it shall be a blessing for a sick world, a world filled with broken promises, selfishness, and separations, a world longing for light again. I see a time of 7 generations when all the colors of mankind will gather under the sacred tree of life, and the whole earth will become one circle again. In that day, there will be those among the Lakota who will carry knowledge and understanding of unity among all living things, and the young white ones will come to those of my people and ask for this wisdom. I salute the light within your eyes where the whole universe dwells. For when you are at that center within you, and I am in that place within me, we shall be as one. This said by Crazy Horse in 1877, the year the broken promises took the Black Hills from the First Nations people, the year that Crazy Horse was taken from this world by a bayonet in captivity, and the year that Crazy Horse then went to the spirit world. And I've written here sane horse because this is like the most sane thing I've heard in a long time. I feel like a crazy horse. I just watched this incredible documentary, and I'm looking at this playlist of all of this astro marathon that Gary Caton and I have recorded, about 10 hours worth over the course of the last few days. And I'm looking at these videos here, these videos that have brought truth and some pain and some harsh reality to look at. And my heart is heavy, and I don't always look this way. Astro marathons and incredible sun yesterday, so a lot of work outside and some consultations, and I'm not sleeping much. And it's okay because I'm being awakened. And this morning, very clearly so by Jupiter. And I went out and was able to make eye contact with that great bright light, because I'm asking for light in my heart so I can share. And I'm asking to honor the light in all beings. Can we pray for what we love rather than what we hate? For that's not prayer. It's difficult, yeah? So Gary Caton and I have been standing in solidarity with the water protectors, and I hope that's enough. I mean, when I engage and I share astrologically, or I tune in this way, it is a state of prayer for me. And I'm not sure that that makes sense to all beings out there. It probably makes sense to you because you're watching. But that's just kind of how I do. I also sat last night and drummed for a couple hours, actually realizing my drum's not on the wall where it usually hangs because it's in the other room. And really sat in prayer and asked for my heart to be filled with light in the way that I can share and spread awareness and stand in solidarity, though I'm not there, where people are being pepper sprayed right now and shot with rubber bullets, and the pain of having a president who's not addressing this. He's not addressing this. He's not standing in honor. He's not living up to the words that he spoke some time ago, where he said he would honor the First Nations people. Knowing that the candidates for the election, which is just happening in a few days, aren't speaking at all about this, which is so important, but we're speaking about this and we're connected to it. And millions are rising in support. And like this beautiful invitation and prophecy that Crazy Horse, a really sane horse, spoke in 1877, we can feel this happening now. I've also come across black snake prophecies, maybe you have too, of when the black snake crosses the river, the 7 tribes will come together to defend the water of life. And if they fail, it will be the end of the world. Now, I must say, I've heard that in a couple of places in YouTube. I haven't been able to track down the original prophecies. Some have said that's both Lakota and Hopi. I haven't seen that yet, and I'll keep looking. But regardless, this seems to be going down right now. So it's a present prophecy, if nothing else. I woke this morning with a vision. I've been reading this wonderful Lakota Star Knowledge book, and I really look forward to sharing more about what I'm learning here. Gary and I looked into some of these Lakota constellations and the amazing alignments of this chart that we've been honoring as like a birth or world chart for Standing Rock Reservation. And I'm learning so much there, and it's helping me connect to the sky in new ways, and also to understand ways that I have been connecting to the sky that I didn't quite have language for. Um, and I saw in a vision this morning, just as I was waking, how the solstice sun aligns on a line between Standing Rock Reservation and the Black Hills. So the winter solstice sun will set over the Black Hills as seen from Standing Rock, and the summer solstice sun will rise over Standing Rock as seen from the Black Hills. And this is a pretty amazing thing because the summer solstice in our time rises in this sacred hoop. So the sacred hoop above is mapped on the earth below as the Black Hills. And from this earthly sacred hoop, they will watch the sun in the heavenly sacred hoop rise over this place in South Dakota where the Standing Hill Reservation is. And now, wait a second, South Dakota or North Dakota? I've used both charts. Here's the South Dakota chart. Here's the difference if it's North Dakota, okay? So barely any difference at all. I need to bring in the angles to show this. Instead of 9.5 degrees Taurus rising, we'd have 10.5 degrees Taurus rising. Instead of 19 degrees 50 minutes Capricorn, so basically 20 minutes Capricorn at the midheaven, we have 20 degrees 15 minutes, so basically 20 degrees Capricorn at the midheaven, because they're close by, yeah. And because we don't have an exact birth time, it's not going to shift so much. Soon I'm going to create a video about some of this Lakota Star Knowledge and about some of these these alignments of the solstices. And I was called to do that this morning, and I started to, but then I drew a teacup, as I like to play teacup tarot for these things. And what I received was the North Lunar Node, yeah, Rahu, or the head of the dragon. So fill that with tea for spirit now. It's asking me, I believe, to speak some about the soul path and how I see it in this chart. Now, Gary couldn't make this talk today. It's amazing that either of us still have a voice, and he's working away, and maybe Gary will create a video solo like this, and I hope we'll have some duets in the future, but I've got to honor the call and continue here. It just seems to be the only thing that's going to keep me sane, maybe. And so I share, and we'll speak about these nodes. And Gary and I spoke about the lunar nodes at length for this chart of the Fort Laramie Treaty, April 29th, 1868, Mercury's Day, Wednesday, on the second chapter of this series. And so you can see that at length there if you haven't been watching them in order. But the node came up in my teacup tarot, and so I honor this. And the nodes have often, recently anyway, in the last 100 years, kind of been seen as a path of fate or a path of the soul. Many modern astrological paradigms see that we move from the south node to the north node. So from Pisces to Virgo in the case of this chart. And Gary and I spoke about that some in that episode. The Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, which in so many senses remains the stock of my starry stew, though I study many astro kung fus, sees the path of the soul in a different way. And I'm going to speak about both today. The nodes are very significant right now. Yeah, because at this time in 1868, South Node Pisces, North Node Virgo, same thing today. 2.5 degrees Virgo North Node back then, and right now 10.5 degrees. And the nodes move retrograde. So this node is about to align, and there will be what's called a nodal return. Sometime, looks like maybe March, early April. All right. But it's in the hood. And 18.61 years for the nodes to generally retrograde their way around the zodiac. So every 18.5 years, we all have a nodal return. In between, we have a nodal reversal where the north node is at the natal south node and vice versa, because the south node is always directly opposite the north node, at least for the lunar nodes, which is what we're looking at here. And as we expressed in that second chapter, well, the nodes, the lunar nodes, are where eclipses align. Because from the Earth's point of view, the nodes are about the moon's course passing the sun's course. So only new moons that align near the nodes will give us a visible solar eclipse. And only full moons that align near the nodes will bring to us a lunar eclipse. So very significantly, as we shared in that episode, I will certainly continue as I move forward, because my current eclipse study / obsession is what really first called me to this Standing Rock astrology. It's like, wow, this August 21st, 2017 solar eclipse that's going to be visible in the United States, the first total solar eclipse visible in the United States since the 1970s. We've had annular solar eclipses, but this will be the first full total solar eclipse in a long time in the United States. It won't be a total solar eclipse as seen from South Dakota, North Dakota. They'll see a very close to total solar eclipse a bit south of there and west of there, the total solar eclipse path. And I'll show that at length in future episodes, I sure hope. But today I want to speak about the nodes. I will show you, though, that these eclipses, so let me show you these eclipses next year. I'm talking about August 21st, 2017, and 29 degrees Leo, with the North Node close to Mars, the 25th degree of Leo, okay? There's a solar eclipse before then in February 2017, February 26th, the 9th degree of Pisces, with the South Node 3.5 degrees Pisces. Look how close that South Node is, how the nodes are aligned to the Standing Rock nodes at that time. Mercury's there, Neptune as well. Well, let's look at those Standing Rock nodes, or eclipses, the year of 1868. So before Standing Rock, there was a total solar eclipse, 4 degrees, 4.25 degrees Pisces. Just look how close that is to this February 26, 2017, Pisces solar eclipse. Yeah, so this is very significant. And then in August of that year, August 17th, 1868, here we go, the 26th degree of Leo, with a node right there, 26 degrees. You see how similar they are. Now, this one was not visible in the United States, and I'll be looking at these different eclipse passes and how they bring different cultures together and these kinds of things. And I think that for another time. But one thing I would also share, as we heard from Crazy Horse to start here, in the year of 1877, this year when the Black Hills were taken and this treaty was broken, for sure. There was a solar eclipse, actually a lunar eclipse, on February 27th, 1877. And look where it was. The sun in Pisces with Saturn, the moon in Virgo, right where the nodes are, what, today. All right. And so this is why I'm called to share. Yeah, the heavenly harmonies sing loudly. But how can I share today? Because I don't want to look at the predictive techniques. I don't want to look right now at the history. I'm called to do that. Thought we would get to it a lot sooner. Gary and I took a deeper look at this chart than probably he and certainly I have done for any chart otherwise except for our own. I mean, I've never looked at every planet in that detail. I have some clients who return a lot, but typically we're engaged with what's happening for them now. We don't get to go here, right? So students as well, but they're really going that deep on their own time. And it's amazing to engage with the chart in that regard. And we saw a lot of beauty and strength. It really spoke to us of what we feel, the wisdom that we're hearing or we're connecting to from these First Nations people. It connected us to that song, to that sacred song. And yet, what about all this suffering beyond suffering, as Crazy Horse said? Where is that in this chart? Am I just a bad astrologer because I'm not seeing all that? Or how am I seeing that? And Gary and I spoke about Saturn, and as the nodes cup came in today, I mean, this is a very important aspect on this chart. Saturn squaring the nodes very strongly too, and retrograde coming back to make a perfect alignment to them. The sun with Pluto, we spoke about a bit. Mars squaring Uranus and conjunct Neptune. These are all different things that will bring some challenges in. So no doubt that's alive. But if I was just going to take this chart on a full fatalistic, old school astrology view Would I say this is a chart meant for trouble, suffering beyond suffering? I don't really think so. And remember, this is not the chart for the Sioux. I mean, could there be a chart, right? It's not a chart for the Black Hills. Could there be a chart for the Black Hills? It's a chart that we're using because this land was, the boundaries, I guess, were made for this land at the signing of this treaty on April 29th, 1868. As we've talked about and justified why we're working with this chart in the first episodes here. But there is tension in this chart, without a doubt, you know? And I'm really feeling, and I've seen this in mundane astrology, irregardless, is that nations will take longer to go through their initiations than people will, because nations live longer than people do, typically. And thank God this one is still alive. Because we are coming into this time, I think, that we heard in that prophecy. We are certainly coming to this time where the young white ones are seeking the elder wisdom of the Lakotas who still remember that all life is spirit and sacred and connected. The tribes are gathering together. The people of many colors, the rainbow tribes, are coming together. And this is being ignored by the mainstream media? Isn't this the greatest event possible? And why did it take this long? And did there have to be this suffering? Is that part of this song? And now that word, you might have heard me say many times, that's how I hear a chart. This isn't some doctor's chart diagnosis. It can be used that way. This isn't some, for me, like deterministic path of fate. We can see some of that here. We can hear some of that in a song, but this to me is art. The chart is art. I'm not here with my clients to read their chart, to tell them who they are and tell them how it's going to be. I try not to be that astrologer anyway. The chart is their art, their creation, their painting, their promise, their potential. I spoke this thing that I heard from Dane Rajar in one of our episodes, which was that any fool can count the number of seeds in an apple. Not even the wisest can know the number of apples in a seed. And see, a chart is like that. The art is like that. Endless potential. And we're all going to see it differently. What happens if you and I go to the museum and gaze at a beautiful painting side by side? Do you see what I see? Do either of us see what the artist saw? Maybe it lifts your heart in such a way that you could share that with that artist and they'd say, wow, that's exactly what was in mine when I was painting. Maybe there's a dark corner of the art where you're like, ooh, were you thinking about an ex? It's like, you know, now that you mention it, I guess I was at that point. Not that we shouldn't have deep love for all of our exes, yeah. I think you know what I'm saying. So your chart, your soul song, your art is your painting, your creation. A good astrologer, I feel, will honor that and just say what we see. And hopefully, as I like to say at the end of a reading, may this have confirmed things you have always known about you. May it have opened new windows of contemplation, practice, and play. And in true Gemini fashion, may it have brought more questions than answers. The song, for me, that's the real thing. That's my experience. Because my art, my practiced art, is music. And you see, the earth has this tone. We've measured it. It's said to be an F sharp minor chord that we can't hear because it's subsonic, but it's there, yeah? Resonating. I feel that we don't hear it because we are it. And if we would remember that, actually, that would help us come back together to the world tree as was promised here by Sane Horse. Sorry, Crazy Horse. Why wouldn't all of the planets have such a tone? Seems we've measured and heard their music with spacecraft. Why wouldn't every planet be an instrument? Why wouldn't these signs be melodies projected out from the core of the earth And so the planets align with our instruments, engage with this earthly sheet music and play their part. And here we are in the middle of our art, of this song, the planets singing to us of the heavenly harmonies. And so your chart is your song. In the song, you see, that's the fate. As an astrologer, I have to honor fate. Almost every day, I read people a date and tears come, or laughter. That's the day my dad died. That's the day I met her, you know. So there does seem to be a woven fate in this thing, and that's the song, but free will, right? Because we can dance to a song in any way we choose. We can choose not to dance at all, which unfortunately seems to be status quo. That was how I rolled for most of my life. Hand on heart, I have to admit that, but now I choose to dance, and I choose to engage astrologically as a yoga in this way, as a joy and as a fun. And I try to spread that too when I share astrology, and hopefully I can do that today. So this chart, this is a song. And there are some heavenly harmonies that seem to agree in consonance and some in dissonance. And this we find in the nature of the planets and the signs, and especially these geometrical alignments, these aspects. Some said bad, some said good, but really you see their music. Maybe I could play some of them for you. You know, let's have a little bit of a pause and do that. All right, the drum is back, and I'm gonna scoot back because the instrument of choice right now is this melodica, and it's not really quiet. The most harmonious combination of notes is unison, which we really only hear as one note, right? So all of these cats and Aries, they're playing the same note in this regard, but with different instruments. We have a lot of them here. You know, let me go to a whole sign chart for this too. So here we have this Aries note. I mean, maybe Mercury's playing an octave up from Mars, right? So maybe we've got something like this. Still brilliantly harmonious. Well, what about Aries and Taurus? I mentioned this word that I first learned from Gary, actually, called aversion. The signs next to one another are said not to see one another in the old language of astrology. These days we say semi-sextile, 30 degrees, half of a 60 degree, half of a sextile. But aversion, and this is what it sounds like. Yikes, right? So the half step, it's kind of rough. But we get, like, let's say from Aries to Gemini, we have this beautiful sextile from Mercury to Venus. It's a whole step. A little easier to hear than. You see? All right. So the sextile said to be very benefic, very harmonic. What about Aries to Cancer? The square said to be hard aspect. Well, that one is the minor third. Really not as challenging as. That's the aversion or the half step, right? So again, that's kind of like they're too close and too different. They're like on a whole different vibe, man. It's a different world. Then the sextile. Then the square. And then the trine. No, the harmony, heavenly harmony of the major third, the major chord, right? So a great musician once told me there's only two chords. There's minor, there's major. Sad and there's happy. Minor, this is the square. And the trine, the major, happy. Ingeniously, they're very much taught that way in astrology. The trine, bueno, the square, super challenging. So right here, I'm looking at the square from the moon to the sun, or the trine from the moon to Jupiter. We can look at the square from Mars to Cancer. And in whole sign theory, it's really like these chords are happening between all these signs in general. What else? Well, let's talk about the opposition. Like we talked about Venus opposite Saturn. Geometrically, you don't see a line drawn there because he's back in the early degrees 4, and she's advanced 25th degree there, right? But whole sign, this is an alignment, and it's called musically a tritone. This was literally made illegal by the church for centuries. It was said to be the devil's chord, which is ridiculous, I would say, but we can hear that tension, right? It's kind of like that half step. Now, the ones that I don't get when we map musically is that the 5th and the 4th, if you know music, are said to be inconjuncts or quincunx and said to be challenging. Where those are really the most inside, as we say musically, harmonies in agreement. And actually, they weren't said to be some tension back in the day. They just said they weren't there at all. And I kind of wonder, is it like they were too in and too close to one another that they didn't even know they were different or something like this? I don't know. And there's much more we could do with astro music. Ezra Sanzerbell, brother in Portland, has a really wonderful book of that title, Astro Music, and a follow-up too. Check it out. There's a history of this, yeah. But I love hearing the chart, you know, in this way. You're seeing it as a mandala. Your birth chart is a painting. It's an image. It's not just a promise of your great potential. Yeah, it's your emerging self. And maybe it takes longer for a nation to emerge. And so we drew the North Node today to speak about the path of the soul. And this is where I want to bring some heart here. And I need to be, well, you know what? I don't need to be careful. I'm just going to speak from my heart. And it's only like one man's opinion, dude, or whatever Lebowski said. And hopefully, you know that I'm sharing this from my heart. And I don't pretend to know. This is just how I hear this song. And I see in this song some of the tension and release that actually was so beautifully spoken of here by Sane or by Crazy Horse. I should use his name correctly because his name was Crazy Horse, not Sane Horse. This is just such a sane sounding statement. But let's see here. Upon suffering beyond suffering, the red nation shall rise again, and it shall be a blessing for a sick world, a world filled with broken promises, selfishness, and separations, a world longing for light again. Do you live in that world he described? Do I? And many times, yes. And other times I'm feeling the light and I'm feeling the beauty. And sometimes I'm finding my light by going into my darkness and bringing this stuff back out as honoring this history and this genocide. That's not just history, it's happening now, as honoring that makes my heart heavy, but I can look to that disruption and look for love, even in there, look for a gem in that darkness. Upon suffering beyond suffering, the red nation shall rise again, and it shall be a blessing for a sick world. Now, how can he not speak about suffering at that time when not only treaties were being betrayed, but people were being forced to live an unnatural way? But can you hear in this perhaps what I hear? The echoes of one who saw this disturbance and this suffering as the wound from which bright medicine would grow. Well, why would the red nation need that medicine? They don't. We do. And not just since coming to this country. It's been needed for a long time. This genocide on this land was repeated the world over. Yeah. I mean, even with white people, right? Look into the Druids, look into the Cathars. I mean, so many different indigenous tribes around the world, and that's still happening to this day too. But I live in the United States, and my lineage, my ancestry has been part of this thing. And I'm part of this too when I live in a way of broken promises and selfishness and separation, as I often do, hand on heart. I have to admit that. Where is the medicine? The medicine is returning to the land. The young white ones will come to those of my people and ask for this wisdom. And it's not just the Lakota wisdom. Yeah, I live in the Northwest. We have different tribes here sharing truth to us. I've connected to some of the tribes in other countries and other continents that have helped me bring my heart back to the voice of the land. Astrology helps me do that too. Some of the ancient wisdom, even of white skinned tribes, have brought my heart back to life. And I got a lot to do still, a long way to go. And this pain, this disruption that's calling our attention, it is a medicine. It is a pain, a wound from which the medicine will grow. We do not grow away from the soul wound. We grow from it. We flower from it. Are we hearing that the Red Nation itself, in a way, in this suffering, is giving itself to bring medicine forth? And that's what I'm saying. I have to be careful, because I'm not saying that should be justified or that that's righteous in any way. And I really hope you don't hear that. But I can see this in this chart too. And again, this is not the chart for the Red Nations. This is not a chart for the Lakota Sioux. And that's not even their real name, right? That came from somebody who couldn't pronounce the true name of a leader. Look it up. The Lakota and the Dakota, yeah. These many tribes. What do I know? But this chart that we're looking at is for a chart of a treaty that was signed. And at that time, the land was divided and given to the Lakota Nation and the Cheyenne and the Arapaho, other tribes as well. And it was shared, and they lived in their way. And then later, broken promises. Yeah. Buffalo killed, forced to live in a way that was not theirs, and this suffering upon suffering. But from those ashes will a phoenix rise, or perhaps a thunderbird in this case. And will it heal those who have been the perpetrators of this genocide? So in my prayers of pain and begging, I guess, for forgiveness, because I have lived in this way. And I still continue to live in this way when I put my hand on my heart and check in. Am I separate? Am I selfish? Less, but yes. Where does that medicine come from? And we are so fortunate that this wisdom was not entirely lost. This was the case in other cultures, are so driven underground that it maybe died or forgot itself. Elders in these tribes were put in these terrible boarding schools, yeah, and somehow still maintain their truth. And it rises now, and in this prophecy, we hear these many people coming together, and so may that be the scene. So, should we play the trines again? Here, by the way, is this grand fire trine. It's called the augmented chord. So we hear that here, yeah? And we also hear this major, or you know what, sorry, that was a major chord. I should know better. That's in this chart for sure, too. But the augmented chord is a very interesting animal. Sounds tense to us because it's just more major than major. And that's happening here in this Jupiter, Moon, Saturn, grand fire trine that Gary and I really looked at. But I'm really interested now in learning how to speak. I'm very tired as I've shared. And also in this Saturn square to the nodes as the North Node cup came in. And the nodes as a path of the soul. This is very much seen as a line of fate to many modern astrologers. This, my understanding, is a rather new look at the dragon's tail and the dragon's head as the South Lunar Node and North Lunar Node have been called historically, or Ketu and Rahu by the Jyotish astrologers in India. My understanding is that it was Mark Edmund Jones in the early 1900s that brought this idea of the nodes as a path of fate to modern astrology. Dane Rajar speaks about this in his Astrology of Personality. He cautions us not to work as much with the signs of the nodes as with their houses. So what about 11th house South Node and 5th house North Node? Gary and I spoke a bit about that in the second sharing of this series, second chapter. That's to me the line of inspiration and imagination, creation, 11th and 5th. But I would like to speak of shamanic astrology and that look of the path of the soul. So when I say shamanic astrology, I mean the shamanic astrology paradigm, which was visioned forth by a man called Daniel Gemario, and further developed by Caton and many other great shamanic astrologers. That's where I got my start, in the shamanic astrology mystery school. And though I study many astro kung fus, in so many ways it remains the stock of my starry stew, I like to say. I love how shamanic astrology looks at the path of the soul. We honor these nodes. But the path, the general path, is from the moon and to the ascendant. And I'm really feeling that in this chart. I mean, I can see coming from Pisces and coming to Virgo, and Gary and I spoke about that, and Gary more eloquently than I could in that second chapter. So check that out if you haven't already. But what about from the moon? And I spoke about this a bit, and I guess that was the second chapter, and the lunar nodes was the third chapter. It's hard to keep track. It's been a marathon. And if you've been watching along, I honor your patience, and hopefully you're learning some fun things about astrology. And melodicas. Right, so from the moon. Well, moon was mother. I came from my mom, I'm sure of it. We come from Mother Earth. You know, our bones are her stones, it has been said. Moon is memory. Well, where does memory come from? Moon is subconscious. Moon is our emotional need. Where does that need actually come from? These are many ways the moon has been visioned in times old and new. And they all seem to tickle this idea of lineage, of where we come from. In fact, if we just look at the symbolism, sun is the circle of spirit. This inner circle, which I would say is source and so much more. But the moon is pure crescent, the crescent of soul. The moon is the soul. And that's how I work with these two luminaries. The sun is spirit, the moon is soul. And the phase is this kind of emerging relationship between the two. That's just my astro kung fu. That's not shamanic astrology either, right? So I'm a jazzer, right? I learned to play like cats that I really dig, like Daniel Gemario and Gary Caton. And then I find my own voice emerging from there. So I'm not just ripping them off my whole life, right? That's part of the quest. I'm new to astrology. And so I'm wanting to honor many teachers. There's so many ways to pet this cosmic cat, yeah? So anyway, from the moon to the rising. Well, why? So from the moon, again, lineage, soul. Why to the rising? Well, I like to say what is rising when you rose is rising within you. And you are here to raise it up. This is what you are here to learn in this lifetime. So we're using a sunrise chart, and that's okay. And actually, Gary brought, I thought, really brilliant teachings of justification of why that's cool. Taught me a lot. He interrupted me and was like, no, we can use these houses. And he proved the point. So what about rising into Taurus and a Taurus sun? What's rising when you rose is rising within you. This is what you're here to learn. And you're here to raise it up. So as you engage with the mystery school, as shamanic astrology likes to call the 12 tribes, these archetypes, the 12 signs, as you engage with the teachings of the school of your ascendant, your rising sign, that archetype will also engage with your teachings. Because I truly believe this, that the archetypes themselves evolve. And Taurus needs this, you know. Taurus, which was cow, made bull, testiculized, stubborn, thick-skinned. Aren't these the things that we read about Taurus? Really? Taurus is an earth sign, chalice, feminine, yin, down and in. If Taurus is bull, it's certainly that Ferdinand fellow who's laying around smelling the rose. Good call. That'll lift a heart every time, right? The simple way, remembering to stop to smell the roses, living with the land. And this is an interesting thing. We say living off the land. No, how about living of the land? Being in relationship to this truth that all things are connected. This is what the earth teaches. And I spoke in the previous episodes as Capricorn for me is the trunk of the tree and the roots of eldership and ancestry, drinking from the dark water, that which has been buried. So many ways, the direction north for those of us in the northern hemisphere, where the only evidence of the sun you will ever see is your shadow, and it's pointing into the earth. You see those roots from which we drink. That's here, by the way, on a northern hemisphere chart. Well, really, it's here. Virgo is the leaf that reaches for the light and does the inner work that feeds the whole thing, the spirit of the earth. But Taurus, the fixed sign, fix yourself to fix the world. Beauty is a spiritual practice. Taurus is the fruit and the flower. It wants to be tasted. It wants to be smelled and pollinated, which is just as necessary for the tree species. It wants to live of the land in a simple way, in a beautiful way. Now, did the Lakota need to learn this? No. Did they need to teach this? No. Does the white man need to learn this? Yes. Will the Lakota teach us this? According to this prophecy spoken by Crazy Horse, yes. How can we be one with the horse, as Gary and I spoke about many times, living in that relationship with the different tribes, not humans, with the birds. I mean, look to Standing Rock, follow the news, and you'll see pepper spray and you'll see rubber bullets, terrible things, and you will also see the buffalo tribe showing up just when they were called upon. You'll also see golden eagles landing and just being there basically in council. I mean, I've never seen images like it in my life. An eagle right here and people just gathered around it, like listening. Beautiful. These things are happening now. The animals, the other tribes are gathering and coming back to stand in solidarity because water is life. Yeah. So let us do the same. So Taurus rising, to raise Taurus back up to where it really is meant to be and even further beyond. And so sometimes, and this I feel is the truth of our sun sign, because our sun is our life force, our energy, the fuel that we burn. And sometimes we have to, shit analogy right now, isn't it? Or maybe it's the perfect one. Sometimes we have to engage with that heavy fuel, that coal, move our way up until we find the free energy, the new, the highest light. I guess it is the right metaphor right now, though heavy. I could also say we're ascending in octaves. But, you know, you get too high and you don't hear it anymore either. So let's think about that free energy. What is the old Taurus energy? What is this stubborn and bullheaded and this kind of thing? Yeah. And what is emerging? So from a Leo moon to a Taurus rising. And I can share this solo. And this is not, by the way, how Gary Caton astrologizes. Yeah. And in many, many ways to pet the cosmic cat. So I would love it if Gary has the time to share his own take of this chart as a whole, because we've broken it apart and now it's time to put it back together. And this is what I would love to do here, and just to share my heart, you know? So when we have these chords, in a way, I mean, first we just have notes. And there's a beautiful service in astrology, I find, of break apart. I first heard this term from Gary. It's actually what encouraged me to study with him when we first met at the second annual Shamanic Astrology Conference a couple of years ago. Solve et coagula, break apart and put together, he said. Dissolve and coagulate, one of the alchemical traditions. And astrology, in so many ways, I mean, my service for people is to break them apart. You're a Taurus sun, you're a Leo moon, you're a first quarter phase, you're an Aries Jupiter at the vernal equinox point, you're an Aries Mercury as a morning star, and an Aries Mars, young in his own cycle. You are a Gemini Venus at a very mature and bright high evening star place of hers. You are a retrograde Sagittarius Saturn. You are Pisces Chiron in the last degrees. Yeah. So we can break these songs into their notes, break it apart. And sometimes it's a wonderful service in the astrological arts. Yes, you are schizophrenic. It's okay. We all are. We have all of these different voices. They all have different needs and desires. Some of them seem to agree with one another, you know? Some of them are like, I will assist you in what you need. And some of them are like, I don't even get you at all. And sometimes it's nice to just know that all of us are crazy. Yeah. And that's one of the gifts of astrology, to look back in times of life too, where this hardship came forth. This feeling of a curse, guilt, you know, shame about it happening. This is how astrology's really helped me. Looking back and say, oh, you know what? That was actually aligned at that time. What if I had known? What if I had done it a different way? Because the planet just wants me to awaken. It's just gifting me with the opportunity to dance and to do so. And if I choose change, will change have to choose me, as it has done? You know, for me, this is the astrological yoga. So break it apart. Who is Venus? Standing rock chart. Who is Gemini Venus? Heyuka, storytelling, jester, youth, truth, the wind that blows. Who is Gemini Venus in the second house? Who is Gemini Venus as an evening star well along in her 584-day cycle? Oh, evening star, you said, well, now we're not just talking about Venus, are we? We're talking about Venus and the Earth and the Sun. Okay. Starting to bring it back together a little bit. Who is Venus sextile and morning star Aries Mercury? Oh, and now we're starting to hear some of these chords. Right? And so what ends up happening is we break it apart, we dilute it into just these little discrete pieces. It's a great service. Oh, that part of me is what wants that. This part of me is what wants that. How can I get these two parts that want different things to agree? Yeah. And how, as we see in the evolving song and the initiations when planets come throughout time to make significant alignments to the song of the soul that the birth chart is, as we see some of the voices get louder than the others, it's Mercury's time, Saturn's time, you see, or both at once. And how can we do both? Yeah. So break it apart into these individuals and then put it back together. Honor these chords, honor these teams, see how they sing to one another. And sometimes it feels like now there's kind of gang warfare. These guys want this, these girls want this, right? Some of them don't even see one another. I mean, if truly aversion, like this whole Aries crew on this chart, Mercury, Mars, Jupiter, Neptune, can't see the Taurus sun, Pluto, well, how can they relate? Or maybe a better example we shared earlier was that Uranus in Cancer is looking for the moon, because Cancer is known traditionally as the moon's domicile. Let's go to the chart. If I'm getting all technical, right? So here we go. Uranus and Vesta, like in Cancer, they don't see the moon. This aversion, that half step, that tension, that's perhaps so tense that they're like literally in a different, a different dimension, you dig? Well, how could that be? And so what if the Cancer, Uranus, and Vesta need advice from the moon? And the moon's nowhere to be found, not in their world. I mean, first of all, is that really a thing? They're right here. If you see them in the sky, they're close together. So this is according to the old vernacular. It's interesting. I find it's actually beneficial to see the chart this way sometimes. Well, what can they do? Well, they see Jupiter, and Jupiter sees the moon. They're in that minor chord with Jupiter. And they notice this pleasantry in Aries Jupiter. Where's that other note coming from? What is that light? What is that gift of nurturing and soul that we see in you, great gas giant guru? Oh, you know what? I think I'm living in that lady's house. I see in you some of those images and paintings and art on the wall. Wow. Have you heard of this person? Oh yeah, I'm looking at her right now. What can I tell you about her? Right, so now we can do a little cosmic commerce, a little celestial permaculture. It's broken apart. Now let's bring it back together. Yeah, if I need some love from you and I can't see you, perhaps I can talk to somebody who can, and who can be a messenger to connect us together. So break apart and put back together. Yeah. Well, let's bring this back now to this chart, because we're going to look at the history moving forward in this project. I sure hope I'll be moving forward to the desert tomorrow to give a couple workshops and to connect to the heavens and the stars and to connect to the land and to be with my grandfather at his side on his 98th birthday. So I'll be gone for a bit, and hopefully I'll be able to create while I'm away too. It's very important, I feel, to my soul right now. We'll see how that comes through. Might just be through podcasts, I don't know. I create when I'm called, if I can. And when, in that case, it's nice to be home. And you see that in a 4th house Leo moon. Leo, very creative, the artist of life. The radiant light on the stage. They say Leo needs the stage, needs the spotlight. No, not high octane Leo, not free energy Leo. The stage needs Leo because Leo is the spotlight, the radiant one, the true leader. Leaders when we don't need them, because this is the brightness of the sun at this place in Leo, Lammas, the festivals of abundance when the sun finds its way there. Yeah. Hot fun in the summertime, plenty of food to eat. Capricorn is leaders when we need them, Northern Hemisphere, yeah? It is cold. The longest night has come around and it's getting even colder. We're in the survival zone. Did we ration the food? Somebody gonna hold it down, be the trunk, be the roots, keep the rules. What if somebody steals some of that food? It's an important thing, and we see that older wisdom that's necessary in the Capricorn Mystery School as the 10th house, the vocation of this chart, or as I like to see it, as the fruit on the branches of the tree of life, which is the north-south, the vertical line, the meridian it's called, in the sky. And so the fruit are here for a community to eat forth, you know, showing the seeds of the wisdom that we've cultivated along the way that bring us into community of like-minded revolutionary teams to change the world and bring us back to peace and spirit, these kinds of things. So I'm pointing to the houses as I'm speaking short descriptions of how they speak to me. How can the tree grow to the heavens unless its roots have tasted of the waters of hell? Jung said something like that. Where are those roots? We're only the shadow points of the evidence of a sun, where we have to turn our back to the light at midday to see in the northern hemisphere, to see north, our shadow points there. It points into the earth, rooted on the sunrise standing rock chart. In Cancer, rooted in tribe, rooted in mother, rooted in nurturing, rooted in family. Yeah. But we have to what? Drink from the darkness there? This is a promise of light at the bottom of the chart. When the sun is there, it's the middle of the night. Isn't it odd that we begin our days at midnight? Have you ever thought about that? Begin our years in this Gregorian calendar at the darkest time, northern hemisphere. Have you ever thought about that? Because the light has promised it will return. The sun has been born. But it's being born from where? From the darkness, from the coldness, from the ancestors, from its own death. It is born again. It lives down here, and the moon lives in that place. A Leo moon, an artist moon, a creator moon. Leaders when we don't need them, and why then would we follow? Because their horse is first in line, and the battle is actually worth fighting. And this is the battle, my friends, for self-love. Why is that a battle in our day and age? Why are we told that confidence is cockiness? That self-love is ego and vanity? That pride is arrogance? What if we can do a day's work? Yesterday, I recorded hours of astrology with a brother and a teacher I love. I went outside and raked leaves off of a roof and pine needles and cleaned gutters. Did a couple of consultations. Had a wonderful conversation with an amazing being that lifted my heart. And at the end of that, I was very proud and felt alive and radiant. And then I tuned back into what's happening at Standing Rock now, and I tried to hold that light as everything wanted to sink me back into that pain and into that darkness. And look at this moon in that fourth house. So there is a rooted fourth house home, family, tribe of righteous leadership, of a radiance. But at least at sunrise, it was in this place of the darkness. And very importantly, when we speak of the nodes, the places where moon and sun come together, soul and spirit, in my world, well, some of the tense aspects to the nodes will speak volumes. Tense aspects to the moons, and we don't see that here. Actually, this is a beautiful one that I feel wants to come alive over time, and especially when I look at that grand fire trine. But this Saturn square to the nodes, that's not easy. In the ideas of Daniel Jamario's shamanic astrology, this necessitates soul retrieval. Sometimes our lineage can be over-honored. We would literally say that the nativity of this soul song or chart in shamanic astrology language comes from the moon. They are a graduate of the Leo mystery school because of Leo moon. Let's bring the moon back in as we speak about her. They own that PhD. They hold that PhD on their soul's wall. They know all about Leo. They know all about honor. Yeah, they know all about righteous royalty, true leadership. There's this thing where we need leaders in the winter. What if somebody steals some of that food that was rationed? What are you going to do? What if that's going to kill other peoples of the tribe? Will you banish them knowing that means death for them? You see, it's a heaviness. There's a responsibility there. Is it as heavy in the Leo times? As I like to say, leaders when we don't need them, but we follow them anyway because they radiate a light. There's something about how they do it that we want to do. Do we have that leader? Do we have leaders of honor? Do I have a president? Yes, I do, who said that he would honor the native wisdom and make sure that their voice is honored in any decision that has to do with their land, and encourage all of us to listen to their wisdom when it comes to decisions about the environment. He said this, he visited this place, Standing Rock, gave his word. Where is he now? not a lick of honor, not a lick of honor, not radiance, not a leader I can follow. Maybe a leader that reflects this madness of the time that I too am member of and contributor to many times in my life. Probably moments today, for sure, you know. Radiance, honor, true royalty, true celebrity, someone who deserves the pedestal we place them on because their light shines so brightly we can each ignite our own candle from it, you see. So sometimes a lineage can be over-honored. Oh, you are the golden child. And then it's hard to lessen our grip on that which we've already learned so we can move forward into the lessons of our soul, into this teaching of this lifetime, to move forward into that place we have chosen to go, you see. But sometimes it's not honored at all. Sometimes it's shut down. And then soul retrieval, necessary, maybe more than once in a lifetime. How many times for a nation? So Saturn squaring the nodes, the necessity of soul retrieval, the shutting down of the lineage. By the way, shamanic astrology, the paradigm would consider the lineage of this chart the Aquarius job of the Leo tribe, the absolute game changer, revolutionary for all things radiant, royal, creation. Some of those words from shamanic astrology, some of those my own. As I too am a creator, and I honor the inspiration where I've learned it from the tribe and like-minded individuals like Daniel Jamario and Kaylin Castell and Gary Caton and Adam Gainsbourg, some of my favorite astrologers. I have many, many of them. Many teachers who aren't teachers of the starry stories, you know. Mercury, maybe the most important teacher for me and Gary alike. Tree. Holmes, the squirrel who just came to visit. Stellar's Jay, hummingbird, came yesterday. Elk. T-Rex, king of tea. So, attention to the lineage in this nativity. Yes, you are royal. You see, because when it gets cold and we need leaders, well, who's going to break the rules and steal the food if we're aligned in a path of radiant righteousness and honor? You want to be just like them. You don't have to lay down the law. You don't have to send riot police, tear gas. You don't have to send millions of dollars to support people being criminals. No, be of honor. Walk your talk. And what is the most important way that the royalty, the radiant light, is called to serve? You serve the land itself. You serve the animal kingdoms. You don't have dominion over them. You don't own the land. You are the land. And we've forgotten this, you see. And this is a sickness. And perhaps this chart, which shows that the authority figures, you see Saturn, and authorities who are trying to maybe limit spirituality, Saturn and Sagittarius, perhaps especially retrograde and in this square to these nodes and in the 8th house of death and rebirth, saying, no, we don't honor that lineage, that place you come from, that true radiance. So for you to find your way back to the Taurus mysteries, and this is an inconjunct aspect. I'm not sure why the chart's not showing it right now, but from Saturn to the ascendant, I guess my settings don't want to honor 5.5 degrees is that 150-degree chord. There's some tension here too, yeah? So Saturn is about that though. Those obstacles that actually help us grow. That cage, as I like to say, that is the source of freedom. How long does that take in a lifetime? Will it be realized in a lifetime? At Saturn return? How many returns will it take for a nation to turn that cage into freedom? Is this part of the sacred calling of this soul song? As heavy as that is to say. And so I say it again, not in my words, but in the words of a great leader. Upon suffering beyond suffering, the red nation shall rise again, and it shall be a blessing for a sick world, a world filled with broken promises, selfishness, and separation, a world longing for light again. Do we long for this light of Leo, this radiant beauty? Yeah. Do we long for this light of a Taurus sun, of living of the land, with the land, not above the land, playing on her surface and praying with her, yeah? Yes, we do. Does it all have to be taken away for some reason so that it can come back in its beauty? And let's just honor that possibility. Honor that in this nativity, the square to the nodes, sad, the emerging, eventual trine to the moon. Happy, because why? We're here to heal some sick peeps, man, that have lost the way. And they are us, you see, we're all one. But when I see the light in you, and I know the light in me, we meet as one, yeah? So look at Jupiter, look at this grand fire trine. It's amazing because Saturn is meant to be some struggle for us. That's just the nature of the ringed one. And there's beauty and there's wisdom here, yeah? But wisdom earned. This beautiful trine is amazing. So when we connect as spiritual warriors, Jupiter and Aries, I mean, I'm not going to speak about everyone on this chart, Gary and I did for 10 hours. But I will say when I bring everyone back around that this conjunction between Chiron and Jupiter, and yes, over the line, and yes, over a most important line, because that is where the resurrection takes place for the Northern Hemisphere. That is when this is nights longer than days, and this is days longer than nights. This is the rising of the light, you see. And it won't be long before this standing rock chart has its third Chiron return. Let's just see exactly when that goes down. Core healing. January 8th, 2017. Oh, I wonder where Pluto is that day. Oh, exact. At the midheaven. Trine the natal Pluto. All right, astrobabble. But if you speak the language, you know what I'm saying there. Chiron, the wounds of the soul from which our medicine grows. The greatest teachings of compassion and empathy born into the world. The aliens of my cell phone, apparently. You see Chiron and his half-brother, Jupiter, one living in the darkness of the cave, as I talked about in the last episode, and one living in the light. Right at that east point, Jupiter, as we saw, rose due east. In connecting with Saturn. I share that idea of Jupiter as the air lifting the balloon and Saturn as the fabric that allows it to be lifted. There's tension between them just energetically, but here's that trine, that beauty, that major chord. Let's hear it one more time. This time in the key of G, because why not? And so the moon returns its teachings. But first, you see this tension of Saturn squaring the nodes. This tension, too, as we shared in the second episode of the moon being in first quarter phase, the sprouting of the seeds. And where is the moon? But in the darkness. So as we find again in the home, fourth house, in the lineage, at the roots, in the ancestors, that light of radiance and true leadership. Yeah. The seeds sprout through hard soil. Hard soil. We retrieve what was taken by authorities who told us how to pray, who told us you would be taken away and put in some school. It's not the education that was asked for, is it? Is that education at all? That programming? Where has that shown up for me? For you? Not in this way. But it's alive there in our sickness. And as we merge back to the true east, what is east? The direction of the rise, on the way to the reach, new life. So we'll see as I move forward, as we're looking through historical moments for the Lakota tribe and for Standing Rock Reservation. We honor this Fort Laramie Treaty and honor how it was not honored at all, and these promises were broken. We'll see different voices here come alive. And this is how it is with the arch of the chart. Our song is our song, and yet it evolves. The tempo changes, the feel, maybe the time signature, the instrumentation. And sometimes in our life, isn't it those great initiations that awaken these pieces of us that we didn't know were there? These other lights turn on and start shining and start singing. These other notes are heard, yeah? How is that for a nation? If indeed this nation, through this suffering and suffering, would birth a medicine that would heal the sick, how long does that take? What are the astrological signatures of those awakenings? Will we see those as we travel through time and honor the alignments through predictive techniques of astrological transits and progressions and others? And when are those predictive techniques productive and when are they not? Because as we look to this time now and the eclipses, for example, next year, how can we honor those alignments to speak to our soul and engage us with an awakening and a love rather than a pain and a shutting down, you see? This is my intention here, to honor this astrology, to share with you. And thank you for watching. And I hope you'll share with me. And I hope you'll share with the world. There are people who don't know about Standing Rock. We should know about this. We should speak about this. The more awareness, the less the military, the police will be allowed to commit these crimes. It's heating up out there. Let us please connect as we are right now in prayer. So now through words and other times through silence. Can we hold the water dear? Yeah. And just share our love for it every time we take a sip. More water, less barcode. The future direction of the soul of this chart, from the eyes of shamanic astrology, is the Leo job of the Taurus tribe. Give Hanuman his tea back. A new radiant light and leadership of living of the earth in simple play. How can we bring our own light to the smelling of the rose in such a beautiful way that the rose can smell our flower? Can we be flowers of beauty growing from this dark soil, just as the lotus emerges from the swamp? You can, and I love you for it. Can I? I sure hope so. Can we? Can our people? Can we stand in solidarity with these water protectors who are doing just that for us all? Yes, we can. And this time for real, because it's us saying that. And when we walk in a way of honor, our word is our bond. Thank you for joining me on another Astro Quest. This is your friendly astronaut, Gemini Brett, signing off. Love and planets to you. I will see you on Earth.